Bonsoir et bienvenue à Stone & Chalk. My name is Marianne Lafontaine. I'm the General Manager of Stone & Chalk in Sydney, and I'm very excited to have you here today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to their leaders past, present and emerging. Very excited to have you here today. I think it's almost a year since we signed our MOU with La French Tech. I think it was in this building, a couple of floors down, probably this time last year. And we're planning this event for such a long time. So I'm really happy to have everyone here today. For those of you who don't know Stone & Chalk, we are a not-for-profit that was set up in 2015 to serve the Fintech sector. In Australia, we started in Sydney and now in Melbourne, Adelaide. And last year we merged with a cybersecurity organisation, or Cyber. So together we're trying to change the way that Australia works with startups and scale-ups. And our mission is still to make sure that we transform Australia in a sustainable, technology-driven economy. So our job is to help a lot of our startups export, and in this case, export to Europe via France, but also welcome a lot of startups and scale-ups from overseas to come over here. So that's a little bit about our story. I'll be around, and so if you want to come and talk to me, please do. But I'd like to hand over to Natalie and Maya from La French Tech. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. It's really nice to see so many of you, and it's really nice to see a full room. I'm Marion, and Nathalie is with me here. We are two French, almost soon Australian entrepreneurs and startup founders. We are the co-president for La French Tech Australia. For those of you who are not too familiar with what is La French Tech Australia, we champion collaboration and relationship between France and the Australian startup and entrepreneurship ecosystems. We're a community of 150 entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs, investors, public and private entities, employees as well, working French startups, and we champions the development of growth of anyone who wants to launch businesses, but also anyone who wants to bring a French startup to Australia and vice versa to France. 1 year ago, we got accredited to represent La Mission French Tech in Australia. And we are one of the 108 French tech community all around the world. And very proud to be the first French tech community in Oceania as well. We're very lucky because the French government usually don't give out country accreditation. They like to give city accreditations. But we explained them that we spent a year building a community all around Australia and that kangaroos were everywhere in Australia. So they gave us the accreditation for Australia straight away. We're very excited about this first event, not only because it's the first one that we have online since the pandemic and since our accreditation, and it's been so long, and I'm sure that all of you were excited to finally meet people from La French Tech in Australia, but also because we are meeting our team of community leaders for the first time, and it means a lot to us. And also because we just received the community fund from the French government. And this event is the first of a series of 4 events that are going to happen this year. And if you want to know more about them, go check out our website, register your startups, and follow us on our social media, and you know everything about them. We would like to thank a lot of people, but we would like to thank Lorraine, we would like to thank Diane for their amazing organization skills. This event is here thanks to them. They worked so much for so long to make this happen, and we would definitely not be able to do it without them. We would like to thank also Stu, Jérôme, and Samuel, who also helped on the organization of this event from our team at La French Tech Australia. We'd like to thank the French Embassy and Monsieur the Ambassador of France in Australia, Jean-Pierre Thébault, the Consul Général of France in Sydney, Anne Boyon, the Service Économique and Business France, especially Pauline, Dimitri, Stéphanie, and Antoine Chéry, who are in the room today. I would like to thank Investment Lisa as well, Stone & Shaw for hosting us and being a wonderful partner for La French Tech Australia since a year ago. We would like to thank our drink sponsor, Udemia, and all fantastic speakers today. We can't wait to know more about the fintech ecosystem in Australia and in France. And without further ado, we'd like to welcome Amy Brown on stage, CEO of Investment New South Wales.
Thank you so much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you this evening. My name's Amy Brown. I'm CEO of Investment New South Wales, and I'm Secretary of the Department of Enterprise, Investment and Trade. And I've been given the opportunity to spend a few minutes talking to you before we hear from our exceptional panel. I'd like to start by also acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Now, I'd also like to acknowledge some distinguished guests that are here with us today, in particular Anne Boilon, French Consul General, who I've gotten to know well over the last few months in particular, and Antoine Sherry, Head of Economic Services at the Embassy of France here in Australia. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you this evening. Now, in case you don't know, Investment New South Wales is New South Wales's government agency with a mandate to reinforce New South Wales as the most desirable place in the world to visit, invest and do business. As the Consul General refers to us, we are the Department of Attractiveness. I'm happy to take that. And our mission is to deliver economic and social benefits for the people of New South Wales by growing our economy and orientating it toward the future. Last month, Investment New South Wales became part of the broader department, Enterprise, Investment and Trade. And the idea there is that we bring together enterprise and trade, and in particular, our global capabilities around that, together with tourism and hospitality, sport and culture. And by bringing together economic transformation and livability, we know that we will be able to make New South Wales the most attractive place on the planet. We know that innovation and international collaboration are crucial to a strong and resilient economy. And that's why I'm excited to be part of this event today to deepen the connection between the French and New South Wales startup fintech ecosystem and support New South Wales fintechs to expand into Europe. Now, I'd quickly like to cover off on why French fintechs should put New South Wales at the top of their shortlist as their next location in the Asia Pacific. So you might know this, but Sydney is a leading global financial centre and one of the largest and most innovative hubs in the region. The financial services sector here in New South Wales is bigger in scale than those of Malaysia, Hong Kong and Singapore. Sydney is the natural home for financial services. It's home to the Reserve Bank of Australia, the Australian Stock Exchange, and over 80% of international banks reside here. As the financial capital of Australia, Sydney is also the hub for financial technology. With our strong financial services sector and skilled workforce, Sydney is well on its way toward establishing itself as both the regional and global fintech hub. It is a fast-growing sector. In fact, Australian fintech industry has grown well over 1,000% in less than a decade, from a $250 million industry in 2015 to a $4 billion industry in 2021. Sydney is now home to more than 60% of Australia's fintech industry and ranks 11th as a global fintech hub. Sydney is also home to half of Australia's startups, many of them in the fintech sector. Now, that's no surprise. Sydney has the best of both worlds, both world-leading economic strength and lifestyle, and you need both. With more STEM graduates than any other Australian state and the largest pool of skilled ICT workers in Australia, it's a great place to grow your tech company. While entrepreneurs benefit from the city's dynamic, educated workforce, what truly sets Sydney apart is its tight-knit tech community based around innovation centres and accelerators. Anchored by business software leader Atlassian and local unicorns Canva and Zipco, among others, Sydney's startup ecosystem is growing fast. And it's backed by rapidly increasing fintech investment activity. More than 50% of all venture capital invested in Australia is invested into New South Wales startups. The success of the Sydney Startup Hub, where we are today, is testimony to this, and our wonderful hosts, Stone and Chalk, who have done a phenomenal job assisting emerging tech innovation with access to capital and infrastructure, empowering the founders of the industries of tomorrow. New South Wales is also invested in Sydney's Tech Central, which is set to become Australia's largest technology hub and world-class innovation ecosystem. It's home to 3 world-class universities and is quickly becoming the base for startups, scale-ups and anchor tenants such as Atlassian, making it Australia's innovation engine. Now, just as we want to welcome French startups to become part of our innovation ecosystem here in New South Wales, when New South Wales tech startups want to expand into other markets, we are ready to help them succeed. So to assist this, we have dedicated teams here in Sydney, but as well as overseas, with a new New South Wales Trade and Investment Director starting in Paris next month. Our new director for Paris, Maxime Elgoum, joins us here this evening. I was talking to him. Yeah, give us a wave. Thank you, Maxime. Before he moves to Paris in coming weeks. And this representation signals the importance New South Wales is placing on attracting French investment into New South Wales and helping New South Wales businesses to export and expand to France. And the timing is perfect. France is a key player in the European and global tech ecosystem, with French startups attracting almost $20 billion in funding since 2016. In 2019, President Macron set a target for France to become a startup nation with at least 25 French unicorns by 2025. And they're clearly overachievers because this number was reached 3 years early in January this year. So strong government support, a large tech talent pool and thriving innovation ecosystem has made France a great destination to grow your tech business. And we want to help connect French and New South Wales tech innovation hubs and grow trade, investment and R&D opportunities between France and New South Wales. There are exciting initiatives on the way. So as we know, in June last year, La French Tech and Stone and Chalk in Sydney signed an agreement just downstairs in this building in the presence of the French ambassador to exchange tech talent and innovation practices. So my call today is to build on this momentum. I'm thrilled to see the French and Australian business community back together this evening. And now that international borders have opened, the New South Wales government looks forward to bringing the best and brightest from France and New South Wales together even more often to nurture and grow innovation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Amy. So fantastic to be here tonight, and great to see such a turnout and such an interest in the French and Australian fintech ecosystems. My name is Stu. I am a business development manager with Wallex. I am also the fintech community lead with La French Tech, having worked in banking and finance for quite a while over in France. I'm honoured to be here tonight to be able to host the panel with you. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists. Having spoken with them all, they have some excellent insights into the fintech community around the world. Before I hand over to that, I would like to introduce Monsieur Alain Clot to say a few words before we get into the panel discussion.
Is it my turn?
Can you hear me, Alan?
Sorry for the delay. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you, at least on a remote basis. I hope one of these days I'll be able to pay a visit to this beautiful country and very promising market. My name is Alain Clot. I'm a former banker. I'm currently chairing France Fintech, that happens to be the association gathering, representing, federating the French fintech ecosystem. We've got 300 members and 50, 60 partners. And we are both lobby, professional association. Obviously, we are communicating a lot on our ecosystem. I've been asked to introduce our ecosystem in a few minutes. So if I may, I'll get back to a little bit of history to explain where we stand. Despite what one can think, we started very early in terms of alternative finance and remote finance throughout a strange thing, a very French called Minitel. I know the French know that strange terminal given for free to every single citizen in France for free in the early 90s. And one of the main applications of that Minitel was remote finance. So the French were customized very early to access to the bank account, I would say almost 10 years ahead of the US, and to transfer funds and to access to some basic functions. And also it paved the way to the creation of genuine alternative players, not called yet at the time fintechs, but alternative banks called Boursorama and Cortal, operating on a pan-European basis and being genuinely innovative and alternative players. And then some issues slowed down the process that explained that we wasted some time, especially vis-a-vis London in terms of creation of a proper fintech ecosystem. We were missing three main resources. First one, venture capital, that was very poor at the time. Almost everything was financed on a banking basis. Number two, what I would call an innovation-friendly regulator. As you maybe know, the continental regulators were used to ruling by the book, as we say, and be sometimes a bit reluctant to give agreement to very innovative players with low equity basis. And the third resource that was lacking is obviously the main one is the consumer. Until recently, on the continent, consumers were used to dealing with global players, one-stop shopping business models in both banking and insurance, and those players being very powerful, very profitable, and still today, actually. And all those three issues have been fixed, I think, today. In terms of venture capital, we're enjoying a position within the top two in Europe, and some quarters number one in Europe. Our two regulators for both markets and financial services have gone what I would call a cultural revolution to start with joining up their effort and dedicating specific teams to our ecosystem. We are talking to on a daily basis and much more innovation friendly. I would just mention one example for a market regulator called AMF. Once you get regulated in the UK, if you want to transfer some activity on the continent, you just photocopy your file, not even a translation, and providing the copy is validated, you get automatically an agreement. I didn't think in my generation that I would see on my lifetime, and it shows that clearly things have moved very quickly. And the third thing that has changed very significantly is consumer habit. And there, as usual, the French switch massively to new usages. And we just mentioned one example, a very well-known application in Europe called Lydia, a payment peer-to-peer application. And today, one French citizen out of three aged between 18 and 35 is using Lydia on a daily basis, which shows that it could go very quickly if things are done properly. As a matter of consequence, we've enjoyed a very sharp acceleration in our ecosystem. The areas that are growing up fastest being obviously payments, new banking systems, insurtech, crypto, which is very popular in France, SMEs banking, wealth management, and tools designed specifically for CFOs, HR, which is to say the French fintechs are targeting no large corporations after having focused on retail banking and SMEs. And obviously, the big chapter called New Credit, Buy Now, Pay Later, sorry, interesting lapsus, dynamic scoring, etc., to mention a few examples. To end this short presentation, let me mention a few facts and figures. Today, we are having over 100 fintechs in France. We've raised 2.3 billion euro last year, 1.5 since the beginning of this year. Just to give you an indication, it's twice as much as Germany. The amount raised in Germany, which is to say, we are ranking number 2 in Europe, behind the UK, which is still the largest ecosystem in Europe. But we are catching up year after year, quarter after quarter. We've created 30,000 jobs, and we intend to recruit 15,000 more this year. We've got 11 unicorns. And we are by far the largest tech ecosystem within the French tech ecosystem, whatever parameter you take, fundraised, employees, number of companies, etc. I think today we are enjoying, we are evolving in a quite effective ecosystem, which is both in a sharp development phase and enjoying competitive ages. I will mention education, where French schools are usually well recognized in terms of maths, cognitive sciences, IT and finance, where our ranking at the international level are quite good. Number 2, I will mention the ecosystem itself, which is very well structured now. We're enjoying a very good relationship with the French government. We're talking to on a very regular basis. You mentioned, obviously, what was called at the time the startup nation. It helped a little bit, but it started earlier, and the contact is excellent with qualified people understanding our business. And we've been able to pass a few laws dedicated to our activities, which shows the support. Obviously, we are part of the European space politically, and you maybe know or maybe don't know one of the creation of the European Union, which is very effective, which is called the regulatory passport. Once you get an agreement in one given country of the European Union, you get access automatically to the rest of the Union, which is to say, by far the largest market on earth. It's 500 million consumers with high level of spendings on investing. And obviously, as a citizen, the Brexit was a tragedy to me. But as a chairman of France Fintech, it was a piece of luck, because as a matter of fact, players keen to operate within that largest market on earth is bound to locate on the continent. I feel sorry to my British colleagues, but it's a matter of fact. They are still, once again, the largest market on the European continent. So, and we are still dealing with them a lot. But France is enjoying the position of leader in terms of jobs relocation to the continent, significantly ahead to Germany, which is the second in that ranking, because we've got the combination of those parameters, and also something that is not even mentioned, not often mentioned, which is a special relationship to Africa. And we've got a lot of joint ventures with African colleagues. And you maybe don't know, but for example, in terms of payment or blockchain applications, Africa is having the lead. Half of the payment apps on earth are located in Africa. So that is a major leverage. And a large proportion of our members are already operating in 5-6 countries, mainly within the European continent. And they are now obviously contemplating setting up in Asia Pacific area, and I've noticed obviously all the elements mentioned on the competitiveness of the Australian market, and obviously the US, where a large proportion of members are already operating. So I'm not telling you it's a paradise, but we fixed all the big issues. We're working very hard and operating as an ecosystem, which is to me our main competitive edge. This is it. I hope I haven't been too long to leave the floor to my colleagues, but I'll be very pleased, obviously, to welcome all of you keen to invest on our market and more globally in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alain. I'd like to now invite our panelists to come up front and give a brief introduction about themselves and their respective businesses. I'll start off first with Pierre Kinec. Is that better? I'll start off first with Pierre Kinec, who's joining us from Paris. He's the CEO of Genji. Pierre, would you like to give a bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, pleasure. So very happy to be here as well. Always difficult to talk after Alain because he mentioned a lot of exciting things about France, and I think really what's is why we're enjoying such a very good position in the European space as of now. So for me, I'm Pierre Kinec. Don't worry too much about my last name pronunciation. This is from Brittany, so it's sort of difficult. So I'm the CEO of Genji, and we're an enterprise expense management solution. And so in terms of maybe what's sort of relevant in terms of geographies, so we are present in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, and specifically in APAC, in Singapore. From a sales perspective, and we do have employees, but on the tech side, in engineering side, in Australia. So yeah, and we quite expect to have a sales team as well, probably early next year. So in a nutshell, that's it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pierre. Next, I'd like to invite John Blick, who's the Associate Director of Innovation at NAB.
The guy works in tech, yes. So I'm John Blick. I work for NAB. For those of you who don't know who NAB is, it's the National Australia Bank. It's one of the largest banks in Australia and New Zealand. We have over 30,000 employees. And we are very proud to serve over 8 million customers across the world, mostly in Australia and New Zealand, but also in Europe, in That's by customers from retail to businesses and large corporate and institutional customers. For the French audience who's not necessarily familiar with the Australian market, you could compare NAB to a Société Générale or BNP. And I have the pleasure to work in the innovation team, innovation and partnership team. And our job is to be the link between the tech world and the bank world and identify what are the disruptions we can see coming in the financial services value chain and build a relevant response to those disruptions. And we are very conscious that we cannot do this on our own. We're a bank, we're not a tech company. As much as we want to be a tech company, we're huge consumers of tech, but we're a bank. So we do partner, and we partner with very early stage startup or global established players. And the message to you today is, doesn't matter which stage of your development you are, if you have the right solution, if you have the right services, we'll be super happy to you.
Fantastic. Next up, I'd like to invite Michael Warnock. We could all sit down up front, please, so we can have a discussion. Michael Warnock is the Commercial Director at Dolce.
Hey everybody, Michael Warnock, as Stu mentioned, I'm the Commercial Director for Dolce. We're a Sydney headquartered cybersecurity company. We're about 3 years old. Our proposition in the Fintech sector is a little bit different to other people here today. We provide a capability that allows protection against people's identity. As you can probably understand, the financial services sector anywhere in the world is still the #1 target for cyber criminals. So we have created a first of its type technology that allows a user to authenticate themselves using their own biometric features. So if you can imagine logging into a banking app, rather than putting in a PIN number and a password and all those kinds of things you have to do right now, you simply just take a photo of yourself and use that as the proof point of who you are. So we are 3 years old, as I mentioned. We're working very closely with Amy and the team in Investment New South Wales in regards to our global growth. We'll be across the RSA in a couple of weeks' time, and obviously we're going to focus around accelerating into key markets, France and Europe being one of those. 25 staff, sorry, 25% of our staff actually are French. So some of those are European, some of those are American, France. And my CEO is hiding down the back there tonight, just mentioned, you know you're making it on the world stage when you start getting spammed in French. So making really good grade. So good to be with you tonight. Thank you.
And finally, Eric Rimflin, he's the former managing director at Evaluate.
Hi everyone, I'm Eric Griffin. Started my career in management consulting and technology digital transformation for the last 25 years, 15 years in Australia, and the last 3 years with Ivalua. Ivalua, we offer a platform in the cloud for tier 1 companies in procurement. So it's basically what we call the source to payment processes with the supplier. It's very supplier centric with supplier relationship management, contract management, sourcing, and procurement operation. So we opened the business here 3 years ago. Our customers are mainly in North America and Europe, but we now have customers in New Zealand and Australia. And, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you, Eric. For our first point, I'd like to develop on what Amy was talking about, which was the goal that the French presidency set back in 2019. They wanted to have over 25 French startups valued at over $1 billion by 2025. So they hit that objective towards the end of 2021. So nearly 3 years ahead of schedule, as I say. Pierre, as you were part of this boom, I'd be keen to understand why you think this is. What were the factors that contributed to this?
Yeah, so I think Alain mentioned some very good points, and obviously I'm going to be biased as well because I'm in the France Fintech board, but I would definitely wager that the political climate has been very good. I think the regulator as well, ACPR, has been keen to let competition grow up and intensify. So I think we've sort of become very competitive. I think, as I mentioned as well, like Brexit has been instrumental in sort of securing France as the sort of number one from a passporting and European perspective. And the internal market is actually very keen on fintech products. So from purely I think a market perspective, I think we had a very good climate in terms of raising some large rounds, attracting more and more VC money due to fiscal incentives as well from the government to VCs, and hence the sort of the growth that has been sort of outperforming all of the other European countries.
Fantastic, thanks, Pierre. John, I know you've done a lot of work in sort of this space. What can governments then do, I suppose, to have government strategy to be able to develop these fintech ecosystems?
Yeah, so I can't necessarily comment on NAP's position on the French ecosystem because we do not have investment there in the French tech. So that would not necessarily be super relevant. But I can come back to this point and to this very question a bit later when we talk about our experience running an office in Paris.
Fantastic. That sounds super interesting. Right. So I suppose on the other side, if you look at Australia, it has also a massively, rapidly growing fintech environment. So what synergies do we have between France and Australia that startups can exploit? I think I'll open this one up to you, Michael.
I think the major change in the last 3 years has been around COVID. You have to think about the way that we're living as an organisation, country, whatever you want to call it. Everything is now rapidly digitalised. You've had to adopt very quickly new way of doing things. And then through that, the services that you need to be able to operate have become very relevant, and the choice that people have has now expanded as well. So if you put all those sort of wrappers together, choice, digitalisation, mobility of services, that spawns investment and capability that the fintech services need to be able to deliver.
Okay. Eric, I know you have some experience bringing an enterprise over to Australia, so I'd be keen to hear a bit more about that experience.
Yeah, if I may, Stu, go back to the first questions about France. So I would just add that the technology industry in France, the software industry is something which has been strong for a long time, and we are not talking about fintech at this time, but we have a large ecosystem, software ecosystem, and if you take the example of iBaba, the company was actually set up in 2000. So it has been, it's already 22 years old, and of course it's growing. But I think the difference now is, well, there's more potential globally, but the ecosystem is definitely growing in this area, in France for a long time.
Pierre, I'd be keen to understand a bit more about your entry into Australia as well, because I know that you've expanded. So keen to hear a bit more about that experience as well, and why Australia might have been chosen.
Yes, I think I'll start maybe by saying that I think there's an interesting parallel to be done between France and Australia, and I think if you consider them from a regional perspective, I think really. And specifically for a French startup, I think if you want to go to APAC, you really have historically 4 choices, which you'll probably weed out to 2. And those 4 used to be Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, or Australia. I'm not going to mention which city in Australia because it's probably got to open a debate. But the interesting thing is that for example, for us, we weeded out Hong Kong and Shanghai as well, like early on. We actually chose first to go to and have a sales team in Singapore due to various reasons. But I was sort of, I think a few years down this decision, I would probably change. I would probably go Australia first. I think the interesting thing is Australia is a really more mature software market than Singapore, and is really less price driven than Singapore is. So I would sort of say that these are 2 major decisions for us. We do have tech employees, so purely from an engineering perspective, specifically mobile people in Melbourne, actually. And so about the parallel, I think this is interesting because it's exactly the same as in Europe. It's really two country apart from the UK, because the UK used to be, and I'm very conscious of that, like the natural choice for ANZ startups going to Europe. And I think it's just really interesting to reconsider the challenge, that sort of choice now, where you have also 2 major countries vying for attention, which are Germany and France. And so I think really there's a huge parallel in between the regional attractiveness of both France and Australia. I think it's something to be said, and we mentioned in the discussion earlier with Stu, is the global sort of compatibility in between French and Australian people. And I think from a management perspective and from a sort of team building perspective, you want to put it in a very down to earth fashion. I think this is really interesting to have countries in your company that are really compatible from a cultural perspective as well. So that really adds to the point, I think.
I would like to talk a bit more about the practicalities of moving into France and Australia. Eric, I know you've spoken a bit about the cultures, the linguistic differences. I'd be keen to understand how can you get across those?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about this, but what to complete Pierre's answer is basically why we decided to set up a company in Australia is the market. It's really about firstly the market, the large of the size of the market, and the nature of the market as well. So it's indeed, as you said, a very mature market. Australian companies are very keen to digitalize and to be more efficient. And actually, it's a market which is much more mature than the rest of Asia Pac. And when you look at other fintech, or depends what you put beyond fintech in terms of scope, but most of the companies in technology which has been present in Australia for a long time get their revenue from Australia, get like 40 or 50% of their revenue from Australia. It's true for most of them. You take, for example, Salesforce, they have their Asia Pacific headquarters in Sydney. You take Coupa, SAP, all these large software companies have 40 or 50% of their revenue coming from Australia and New Zealand. So that's basically the first rationale behind our decision to set up a company here.
Okay.
The second one is the workforce. There's a lot of interesting and educated, as Amy said, people here, and we will take probably in the future advantage of this from a development perspective, as Pierre said on the slide.
And then, John, I'd be keen to understand more about that experience of now expanding into Paris and why Paris was chosen as a destination.
Just before going there, I'd just like to add something to what you said, Eric, what you said, yeah. For the French company who are contemplating the opportunity to invest in Australia, what you have to understand is the market that I'm putting into perspective. That's the 15th largest economy in the world, and there's 25 million people. So to put it this way, and New Zealand is 4 million, and they have also a significant GDP. So hyper sophisticated markets, quite advanced, not as advanced from a tech perspective than where Europe is, but not that far behind, and massive business opportunity for you. So consider this when you are making your choice when opening up an entity in Asia Pacific. Now, going into our experience opening an office in Paris, there's many reasons behind this. NAB has been present in Europe for about 160 years. And historically, our office was in London for obvious reasons. And we have seen over the years the large customer we are supporting investing in Europe, being Australian investing in Europe, but also being European investing in Australia. We've seen the numbers shifting from UK-based to continental Europe. So we had this need to be where our customers are. So we decided to open an office in Europe. And France was in competition with other countries, as you would expect, and Paris was in competition with other cities, as you would expect as well. Paris was finally selected for many reasons, which I explained. Major financial hub, all our customers are there. All Australian customers have been doing business in continental Europe are in Paris. We have to be there. Reversely, French companies doing business in Australia are also in Paris. So we have to be there to support them and be the link between those two markets. So presence of the large financial hub, massive pool of talent, hyper educated, and incredibly competent. So we can tap into this and bringing our Australian roots to this French workforce. Other than I did my own work and spoke to my colleagues who managed the opening of the Paris office. And one of my questions was, how was the experience working with the French government there? And the answer was, dude, it was amazing. They were absolutely great all along the way because there's many reasons behind this. Of course, I think we alluded to this Brexit being a tragedy as European sadly depend about this. But again, great commercial opportunity for France to attract a major bank, a major Australian. So Brexit was one of the elements, but not the main element to drive the decision. But on the support that we received, on the support that we received from the French administration, I think it's really worth highlighting that. So I tend to see the world through the prism of innovation, and I think that's the embodiment of government innovation, because the competition is actually global. It's not France against UK, or it's France trying to play a role as an economic attractor and a wealth developer at a global scale. So you have to think about this from a perspective of regulation. What does that mean from an employment regulation perspective? France has been historically known for not being a business-friendly country. Very tough law regulation. And the successive governments have actually understood this and made major progress in that space. So there's another element, and it's probably cliche. French are being said to only speak French. When's the last time we went to Paris? When's the last time we went to France? Everyone speaks French. And actually, I think that the audience today is the great embodiment of this. Not only you are business driven, not only you are tech driven, but you all speak English and very fluently. So there were all the reasons why Paris was selected and quite outstanding against the rest of the competition.
I do remember when I first moved to France, I got a job and I was told, you'd be fine speaking English. I had to learn French very quickly. I'll open up that question to the rest of the panelists as well to understand the practicalities of them moving into France, and how would you go about doing that and overcoming those barriers?
So from an Australian company to go abroad, the first thing we obviously look at in any market is the market size. What's the opportunity that is going to be there for us? Then secondly, cultural fit, absolutely, and then resources. So for us as a software company, we've got a delivery capability to our customers. So are we able to attract staff? Are we able to attract partners who can continue to deliver what we talk about? So they're I suppose the key reasons. Underneath that, regulatory and compliance that the country operates in, and funding assistance as a scale up. You always want to be able to, I suppose, de-risk your growth where you can. So for me, they'd be the sort of the major sort of levers that you look to pull to be able to choose what country you want to move into, and obviously you look at from all those ticks are there. I mean, as I said earlier, we've got 25% of our staff on the ground there, so we've already got a good understanding of the opportunity that fits, and yeah, it's an exciting time.
It's really different for Iberia because it's a French company originally. However, we are very internationalized because almost 50% of our staff is in Europe and 50% is actually in North America. So I can just share my experience, maybe going to Station F regularly and having meetings over there. And I think like John, we are INSEAD alumni, and I'm going often there because they have a hub and they have a fund, and I'm meeting a lot of startups at Station F. It's very internationalized. I don't know, it feels like being in Australia actually over there or US, and yeah, so it's very similar than this hub.
Eric, could you give a bit of background about Station F and what it is?
Well, it's very. Well, I'm not sure I'm the best to explain the history of this, but it was set up like maybe 5-10 years ago or something like that. Antoine can probably tell us about it. With an environment to make the startups grow, with a lot of universities, a lot of large companies and smaller companies and startups. So it's an ecosystem which is very exciting and in a very nice environment. So I would say that the difference is that the ocean is very far from Paris, so it might be better here from that perspective.
Yeah, I'll throw that one over to you if there's anything you'd want to add. So, yeah, is there anything you would want to add on to that?
No, I think I think it's there's a lot of I think obviously we're a French company, so it's difficult to comment. I think the main thing is probably two things really. I think each country has its own set of sort of employment law specifics that might be more or less Byzantine, I think the second thing is really cultural fit, which has been mentioned a few times, and I think this is really an important point. Specifically, when we are talking about two countries which have so much time difference, so much time zone difference, and I think it's really it is really complicated to get to do sort of global team buildings or that sort of thing, specifically obviously with COVID and it's been nightmarish. But I think there really is something to be said around being able to nurture like the same type of company culture in two very different regions, with a lot of people which are not really able to do daily calls due to the time difference. So I think this is really a key point in being able to export your culture from Australia to France or reverse, and being able to do this. I think this might be specifically more complicated for people like us now going into this year, or Ivalua, for example, like people that have also a lot of US teams, where you just cannot set any time that makes it right for all regions. Like so all sort of whole hands type of events, you need to sort of choose, and you need to be very wary of what that will imply in terms of people feeling excluded. So yeah, so I think this is really, there's a lot to be said around being able to get to sort of a nearly homogeneous culture all around your different sort of subsidiaries.
Thanks, Dan. We've talked a lot about, I suppose, the rapid growth in the fintech environment and for businesses themselves. I'm keen to understand that what would be the benefits for the consumers and the customers. What have we seen in terms of efficiencies over the last 10 years? So I might open this one with John.
The first obvious benefit is more fintechs means more competition, and that means better outcome for customers. Means undebatable. More competition means better experience, means better pricing, and better prices. Sorry, not pricing, and that benefits ultimately customers. So I think that's one of the main benefits.
Competition is absolutely first and foremost. And again, we've seen that through the digitalisation of mobile type services. I think though that with that comes obviously some challenges as well. So people need to be able to secure what they're doing, particularly in that area. As I mentioned earlier, the financial services sector is still the largest target for cyber criminals. So driving growth of the market on one thing is really good, but making sure it's done in a secure way is really important, and ultimately people will take the business where they feel they're trusted and their brand is protected. So yes, growth is great, but making sure it's done in a way that is secure and user-friendly is really important.
We'll have a chat after this about that. Eric, is there anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think the fact that now you have technology in the cloud and you can reach out a lot of customers globally, and that you have products, completely global products, is an accelerator of the productivity and the efficiency of the companies. And in addition to this, there's a lot of innovation definitely coming up, and it's a key factor for nowadays and for the future. So I think our customers are looking for innovation, and they are looking for innovation now, but they are also when they want to buy a product, fintech product, they want to be sure that their future needs are going to be met. And so it's innovation is key. It's not only about how the percentage of the revenue which is invested in R&D, but it's really about the flexibility of the product and the culture of the company to be able to partner with large companies. So indeed, AI, machine learning are really very centric. Security is one as well, but there are many topics which are really significant for the future.
When I think about what's happening in the French tech ecosystem, but also in the Australian tech ecosystem, and put this into the context of a bank, what you guys are doing is you are excellent at understanding a customer problem, very specific customer problem, and build a tailored solution around this. Banks don't have one customer problem; they have many. So we have to be good at everything. And the experiences and the product that you guys are developing force us to actually adjust and match the competition. So whatever is being built you have to be smart around identifying what's being built in France that can benefit Australia and what is being built in Australia that can benefit France. And that could be across payment, that could be across custody, that could be across open banking, that could be across AI machine learning. So think about it, because what's the expression again? All rise, the tides lift all boats. That one. Okay.
Well, I think Pierre, do you have anything you want to add on to that?
I think that's very clear, and specifically to add to what was said around what can benefit from France to Australia or the reverse. I think the specifics of the banking or fintech ecosystems are really the zoning effects in agreements, in credit, in debit, and a lot of things are actually tied to local regulation. So we do have our own set of challenges specifically around the solutions. I think specifically for payments, for interchange, like all those sort of things are really different from country to country or region to regions. So yeah, I think this is a fairly interesting set of challenges, and it's quite interesting to see how this will fare out in the future as regards to sort of local champions between global players. So I think this will be very, very interesting space.
I think we'll throw it up to the audience to see if we've got any questions for our panelists. I'll start. So in terms of the future of fintech, where do you see the fintech space being in the next 5 years? It's an open question.
It's a very difficult question because it's not. There's so many opportunities. I think one of the most interesting one might be around the intersection of fintech, clean tech, and banking. Because again, so the context of the event tonight is how can France and Australia better collaborate? How can create bridges between those two countries and help the tech ecosystem to go and thrive in those jurisdictions? When I think about climate change, it's a global problem. It's not an Australian problem. It's not a French problem. So I think, and we can see emerging really interesting proposition at this intersection of clean tech, fintech, and banking. Again, let's talk about the numbers for a minute. There's many different numbers which are floating around when it comes to climate change, but one which is particularly interesting is to decarbonize the global economy, there's a need for $77 trillion. So I'll just repeat, $77 trillion. So when you put this in the context of each individual economies, we're talking about the equivalent of GDP of countries every year. So the opportunities are absolutely massive. So bring your intelligence in fintech, clean tech, and banks can be there to support and fund the transition because banks are intermediaries. Our job is to place the money where it should be. So if you guys create the experiences and if you drive that demand to help your customers and our customers to identify and navigate the complexity of climate change, it is a massive opportunity. So that's this one. And segue to this is DLT really is here to stay. So the question is, how do you use this sort of emerging technology to apply that to climate change? And NAB is one of the founding members of an organization called Carbon Place, which is a marketplace for safe transaction of high integrity carbon credits. And again, it's not just NAB, it's many banks across many jurisdictions, and we've been recently joined by BNP Paribas, and we are super happy to be joined by them. So, summarizing, clean tech, fintech, banking, but also technologies such as DLT, and we need a lot of intelligence, we need a lot of technology to build those models to understand where climate change is going and how it's affecting every single jurisdiction. So AI and ML will play a major role as well.
For me, crypto becomes more mainstream. It itself has created an ecosystem of supply and demand. We're probably one of the first Australian companies to actually offer our staff to actually pay in crypto. So we're now starting to see people wanting to go into do things different. So for me, the next 5 years, crypto more mainstream, and that itself spurs a new supply services industry around what crypto means to the sector.
Yeah.
Well, I can see more artificial intelligence is a bet, but artificial intelligence and machine learning is it's really about automatization of the processes, but it's unfortunately it's a lot of tasks now can be realized thanks to add-on AI, ML, and much more efficiency data analytics thanks to this in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I'll open that one up to you.
Yeah. So just to point very quickly, I think AI. I think the AI is it's really a game-changing technology. I think we just need more math graduates, to be honest. I think so. There's a really it's for me like really a higher ed problem in terms of talent pool. And then I think the second thing globally, if we take your question on 5 years from now, 5 years is just massive to predict. But I would wager that I think old school profitability problems are going to come back into the SaaS and the VC-backed companies for a while, because I can I sort of foresee that free lunch is sort of over, and there's a line between growth at all cost and a sort of capacity to be profitable at some point. So I think I would sort of wager that there's a line on that.
Interesting. I purposely left any crypto questions out of it just because it tends to be make for an interesting conversation. But yeah, so I was talking with Michael this evening, and we're having an interesting conversation about future security in finance. And there's a lot happening in that space. We were talking about the police are actually keeping photos of people with balaclavas from 5 years ago for robberies, because they expect that 5 years from now, they'll be able to work out using AI what their faces actually look like. So it's a fascinating space. Once again, I'll open it up to the room to see if there are any questions. Take Mike.
Maybe an open and controversial question, but could we see a world in 10 or 15 years where there's no big banks anymore, where there's just fintech? Because John, you talked about personalized experience and customer centricity. That's good. Fintech does very well. I'm just wondering, why would there be big banks in 10 or 15 years?
It's a very difficult question because I challenge anyone in this room to have a very clear picture of what's going to happen in 15 years. I think there's opportunities to more than cohabitate, but just collaborate. I think there will still be a need for banks in the world described for many reasons. Michael is talking about identity. Michael is talking about, by talking about identity, Michael is raising the question of regulation. How do you ensure as a startup that the variety of your customers are correctly identified? Is their money legit? Is their asset legit? What are the sort of operations they are running? How do you bring transparency to the different regulators across many different jurisdictions and prove that the operations you are running are actually legit? So yes, regulation is going to evolve, but just by saying regulation, I doubt that a world without banks will exist. And do you want a world without banks to exist? And that's another question. Who's going to fund projects which are not being profitable according to a solid standard or to an alternative investment standard? You will need banks for that. And banks working with governments to fund the future. So actually, I don't see a world where could be wrong. That's not much. I don't see a world where there's no banks. And it's probably one, it's going to be controversial. With agriculture and another industry which will remain unnamed, banking is probably one of the oldest industry in the world. It's been there for thousands, about 1,000 years. And we can go into history that relates to the really first bank emerging dates from the 1200s and the Crusades. Could you disrupt something which is anchored into humanity for such a long time in such a short period of time? There's another element which is really important to take into consideration, and that's the notion of trust. Governments are trusted. Banks are trusted, whether you like it or not. You trust a bank to give you back your money if something bad happens to you. Would you trust a decentralized organization hosted somewhere in North Korea to deposit your money and fund the acquisition of whatever you want to acquire, the house, a car, something like that? So fintechs are here to stay, but I think that banks are here to stay as well.
So I'm conscious of time. I might open up to one more question before we close off. Is there anyone who would want to ask any about panelists' question?
Someone else maybe wanted to answer to that question of the panel.
What was that?
Yeah.
Maybe just add something. I think this is really a debate between specialists and generalists, because to be honest, fintech and banks are really two types of computer science companies for me. And I think the difference is really that fintechs, due to the VC sort of intensive process, tends to favor going after really something that they do well. and do repeatedly. So it's sort of an unbundling of a bank business in a way, just doing, I don't know, credit or just doing payment processing. And yeah, I think what was said makes sense as well. I think there's really a continuum between both, and I would sort of wager that they will coexist.
Right, well, that's been fascinating, guys. Thanks a lot for all of your insight. It's been really, really interesting. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for coming in tonight and sharing their insights with us. So thank you. I'll now hand over to Monsieur Antoine Chéry. He is the head of the economic service at the French Embassy.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Dear Amy, Anne, Nathalie, Marion, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank first the panelists and everyone who's been involved in the organization of this evening for this fascinating discussion. I think we've heard very compelling arguments as to why it makes good business sense to develop this fintech links between Sydney and France. I will just stick to two comments because I'm well aware of the fact that I'm the last obstacle between you and the drink. So it's always there. First one is, yes, there's so much more that can be done between New South Wales and France in the field of fintech because the two ecosystems are so buoyant and thriving. Amy made a compelling case as to why Sydney is the right location, as to why it is always in the top 3 or top 5 in all the rankings in Asia Pacific when it comes to fintech. And on a more personal note, each time I come to Sydney, I'm struck by how much the startup community does change the landscape of the city. If you go to Everly, if you go to Central, you see physically how startups are changing the city because how dynamic they are, how much they are investing. You see physically the links with the university and with the rest of the business community. So you know it's a success story. You see also the links with the financial institutions. Without financial institutions, and I agree with you, I mean, banks are there to stay. Fintechs wouldn't develop that fast. And you've got that in Sydney with the ASX, with the banks. You've got also public institutions such as Invest New South Wales, which have the right policies to support fintech industry, just where we are today. It's a clear investment from the public authority, from the states, to support the industry because it does create value, it does create jobs. In France, it's the same. First, to quote an American president, entrepreneur is a French word. More than the number of unicorns that we have in France that we're happy to have. I'm struck that now, if I look at startups, which is a word that, well, we didn't use 10 years ago, we have 20,000 of them operating on the French territory, and they employ 8 million people. That also, to me, is a sign of the strength of the entrepreneurial spirit in France. And as was said during this evening, fintech is a large part of this movement. About a third of the money raised by unicorns in France is in the fintech industry. As in Australia, fintech in France has a lot of support from the banking sector, and the banking sector is quite large. Out of the 5 largest banks in continental Europe, in the Eurozone, 3 are French. And all of them are operating in Australia. And we'll be happy to do business with you. As the most astute Australian banks, which have decided to settle in Paris, and we welcome them. We're proud to welcome them in Paris. Good choice. If you come to France as well, you come from the south for the south of the market, but you can also count on public policies, on supporting public policies. Tax breaks, but also visas. If you have the right the right skills, you'll be at the top of the queue to get the visa. And we all know how important it is to have the right visa to cross the borders. It's a privilege, we all feel. So there's much more to be done, and I look forward to the work that we've established with Invest New South Wales to set up large delegations coming back and forth between Sydney and Paris to get the most from these two vibrant ecosystems. And I come there to my second point, which is, if you're interested, there are so many tools that you can make good use of. First one is French Tech Australia. I first want to praise the job done by Nathalie and Marion. I mean, when they decided 2 years ago to take French Tech and to try to get, as we call in French, a labellisation, that is the official support of the French state, they probably didn't realize that they were going to do it in such a difficult time. Out of 5 cities during COVID, with the communities of startups who have a lot to think to protect, to develop their business, it was a difficult task, and you've done it very well. And you've managed to get the labellisation with flying colors and to organize great events. So well done. That shows that French Tech Australia has a purpose, and I can only invite you, all of you, to join the community. It's really worth it. Second, of course, Invest New South Wales, which has made the great decision to set up shop in Paris. I know that Maxime, who's got very strong experience in business development, will also be very supportive in setting up your business links in our city. Business France, Stéphanie, here, the one-stop shop if you want to invest in France. She's got all the answers, all the money. I shouldn't say that, but she has here. But come to see Stéphanie. And of course, our Chamber of Commerce, Jérôme, there at the back, not listening. Jérôme, can you take time to everyone sees you? General Manager of the Chamber of Commerce. No, I know you don't have money. I know you wanted me to say that. But the Chamber there is there for you as well to develop your business here, more than 500 companies here. So thank you very much for your attention. And I look forward to talking with all of you if you want to develop business in our country, together with Pauline, who is representing the embassy in Sydney. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. It was a great event. So, in the name of La French Tech Australia, we thank everyone again. Thank you to all of our speakers for being here. Thank you, a special thanks to Stone and Chalk and Marianne and all her team, without whom this event wouldn't have been possible, because we're in a beautiful location. And yeah, thanks to all the team which have been really helpful during the organization of the event. Thank you to IDEMIA as well, who's sponsoring the drinks. All of our speakers here for their commitment and their insights on fintech. And also thank you to all of you for attending and listening to this panel. Investment New South Wales, of course, and Amy Brown for giving us the pleasure to be here and speaking to this event. So you are all welcome to come and join us for some drinks in the lounge and networking with some companies. So thank you very much to everyone.